Hey everyone, welcome to the first day of Vancouver Art Book Fair. Thanks for everyone for joining us this morning. If you're just tuning in now, my name is Vivian Sming, pronouns she, her, they, them, and I publish artist books through my studio Sming Sming Books, and I'm the guest curator for this year's virtual programming. Before we begin, I'd want to just acknowledge that the Vancouver Art Book Fair takes place on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam and Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I'm actually streaming here from my home in the Bay Area on the land of the xʷməthkwəy people. And as we're here to talk about books and publishing, I also just want to acknowledge the very many histories and knowledges and languages that have been erased through the prioritization of paper as being the only source of history, legitimacy, and value. So I really want to offer these 2 days of programs as a way to understand how publishing and how books can really be a site of resistance, restoration, contestation, and imagination. So thank you for joining us. For this conversation, I'd like to introduce Reginald Moore, who is an avid reader, indiscriminate collector, and occasional writer based in Tennessee. He's also a contributing editor to Luncheon Magazine. And I found about Reginald's collection through his Instagram handle at @xʷməthkwəy. We'll share that in the chat. Where I could just really feel the love of books that Reginald has, and I thought this would be really fun because at art book fairs we really don't typically hear from collectors. And this is really meant to be conversational. So if folks have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat at any time. So hi, Reginald, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So when I first reached out to you about being a collector, you kind of expressed this like hesitation about being identified as a collector. And I think you were like, oh, I think of, you were thinking yourself more as like an avid reader and bookworm. So I thought we would just start there. Like, could you talk about your relationship with books and reading and what books really meant to you growing up?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me. Um, Books growing up. I'm an only child, so that I'm pretty sure that has something to do with it, like finding a world or finding comfort in books. And and going deep into books and spending a lot of time in the library, searching for books and being given books as gifts. All my life, people have given me books for gifts, like since I was a small child, and majority of those books, I actually still own them. Yeah, I think it was just a way to feel less lonely, from being an only child in a rural area in Tennessee. It was not unheard of because my mother's a reader too. It was just something to pass the time because I am in no way interested in sports.
Yeah. I feel you.
Not even looking at them.
Uh-huh. So we're so okay. Like, if you can walk us through this. So you're growing up, and you're just like, where are you accessing books? Did your mother have like a huge library collection, or were you visiting the public
The
library?
library, the school library, like we had wonderful. We at the time, years ago, it used to be you had wonderful librarians who would, if they saw that you had an interest in books,
Mhm.
they'd actually give books to you, put books in your hands. And one of the books that I loved as a child. And when I was telling you, I said, the thing about books and growing up is I always checked out the exact same books, and I would read the same books over and over and over. And I never thought I would own those books, But here's a book that I loved when I was growing up. It's Roald Dahl's Boy. It's like the first installment of his autobiography. I read this book over and over as a child. I mean, multiple times. And it's just one of those books that I never personally thought I would ever own a copy of it. I don't think I read this one because it's really in nice condition. So I haven't actually read this one. But it's just, that is when I was talking about being hesitant about being called a collector, that's what makes you a collector. If you have something, you don't want to read it, but you'll have like a paperback version, and you'll read the paperback version. I think that's probably the thing about collecting that I didn't want to admit to for a long time, but is true. Like, I'm not going to read this one because it's in such nice condition, you know? So it's like, but this is a book that I loved growing up as a child that I would read over and over and over. And actually, you know, reading this, it led me to Judy Blume, Beverly Cleary, Virginia Hamilton, you know, Walter Dean Myers, you know, those people are the ones that, and then those books led, you know, a love of reading in childhood, like it leads you somewhere else, and you're able to find other books that aren't necessarily like those books, but may have been in the same, you know, category as those books, or in the same, you know, shelf as those books. You know, I think the love of reading probably started there.
Mhm. And so what was that point? Was there a specific moment where you started like buying books and building a collection, and maybe it's now where you're just kind of looking around and being like, oh, maybe I am a collector. Like, what was that like point in your life for you, where you kind of transitioned into, like, I mean, you're still a reader obviously, but like, also the idea of owning the book.
I think it, like, you know, like I said earlier, it's like, you know, going, you know, even as an adult, or, you know, a young adult, going to the public library and, you know, checking out books and just never thinking like, you know, you should I own this book, or, you know, where would you even find this book? You know, that type of thing. And I don't, I got to a point where uh being interested in like research and stuff like that. And I'm the type of person who's up at all hours of the night. So it's like, you know, the library is not open at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I think I got to a point where I needed to be in a position where if I'm researching something, I need to be able to go to my shelf and pull that book off and look at it. And, you know, I think it started from there, like just owning multiple books, or, you know, like falling in love with a writer, like say falling in love with like James Baldwin, and then wanting to own all of his books.
Mhm.
And then, you know, you hear this person talk about how they were influenced by James Baldwin, and you want to read their books, and then they have like multiple books. You know, it's really hard to say how a collection grows, because when I first, you know, my first interest in books was just reading books. Then it got to a point, I think, when I learned about like first editions and that type of thing, where I started searching for a book. It's like, oh, this is a first edition, or this is a signed copy, or this book still has the dust jacket. You know, it just, it's like dominoes or something. It just goes, and just it's really hard to say how you end up with this many books. But, you know, I will say it is a challenge to have this many books, because you're constantly dusting and cleaning and rearranging and getting rid of. And sometimes, like, about, you know, every year or so, I'll go through and I'll get rid of. Actually, last week I got rid of a bunch of the books that I had. When I was telling you earlier that I still have a lot of the books that I had when I was a kid, the books that I read as, you know, really a young adult, I thought, you know, these books were only interesting to me because as a young adult, and then they're not comfort anymore. So it's like I was able to get rid of them, but it took me 2 weeks to make myself take them and put them in a box and put them in the car. And I kept going through and was like, you know what, you're not going to read these books again. And guess what? I don't miss them.
Uh, and so can you, moving back a little bit, can you talk about that act of just like revisiting and rereading something over and over again? Are you someone who also does that with like film or other, other media, or is it just like exclusively books? And what happens when you revisit things?
I, I do it basically with everything.
Okay.
I saw a quote somewhere where they were talking about like Virgos are listening to the same music they listened to when they were in high school. And it's so true. I listen to the same songs that I listened to when I was in high school, or, you know, I still love that stuff. But a lot of times I'll get like a quote in my head, something that I've read in a book, or like a paragraph or a passage. Um, and I can't find it. Like, I know it's in this book. And so you'll go searching for the book. And it's like, I cannot find it, but I know it's in this book. So I was like, you know what? Just read the whole book over again, you know. But there are certain books that I just read over and over and over.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there are some writers that I read over and over and over. Just, you go through a period where you reread like Toni Morrison over and over and over, or you read James Baldwin over and over and over, or, you know, Oscar Wilde over and over and over. These are people that I just constantly read. But if I know I love a book now, like when I actually buy books now, if I know I'm going to read it again, and I know I'm going to read it again based on, as soon as I finish the last page, I'm thinking like, let me say something about reading. What I do is like, it's not really technical, but what I do is like, I start a new book on Saturday. I go Saturday to Saturday with a book, and I read chapter to chapter. I never stop in the middle of a chapter. I don't, we were talking one earlier, and I told you, I was like, you was asking me about like, would I ever write inside of a book? No. I would never even bend the pages of a book. Like, I don't even own book. I mean, I have like bookmarks maybe somebody gave me, but what I tend to do is I just read chapter to chapter, and if that chapter is 20 pages, guess what? 20 pages in until I'm finished with the next chapter. But I go from Saturday to Saturday with books. So I find myself, I know if I'm going to reread a book, if it's something that after I finish, I say to myself, how did they do that? Like, no, seriously, how do you do that? And then if it's that good, I usually send them an email. I was like, you know what? I know this is a crazy question to pose to a writer, but please tell me how you just did what those types of questions. So it's very rare. There aren't that many books of late that I have, that I may still keep them, but I ask myself, like, are you going to reread this book again? Actually, that's one of the things where I know if I'm going to keep a book is if and I'm going to give it away, or I'm going to, sell it or trade it or something like that. If it's a book that I know I'm not going to read again, like I just didn't, or just like I forced myself to read the book again, but only, here lately, I guess because of the internet, our attention spans are so stretched to the point of whatever they are.
Yeah, sure.
I have a tendency to read. I used to read that one book. Like, and I was never the type of person who could read 2 or 3 books at a time. Like, I would never remember where I was at, but what I've learned to do is start reading like nonfiction and fiction, and then poetry or something like that can just be in the middle. But just like, if I read, I'll have 2 books going at the same time, and we'll spend 4 hours with one book, maybe 4 hours with the other book. But I always tend to have a book completed by Sunday. But I'm sorry, Saturday. So then I start a new book Saturday. And it's like I'm the type of person who is known to be late for places because I've been reading. And people call me or people text me. They're like, "What are you doing?" I know you're reading. That type of stuff.
That's amazing. And yeah, I think another question I had posed was like, do you really read all, it's just kind of amazing. Do you really read all of your books? And it seems like the answer is yes. And, I mean, it's just interesting because I think sometimes, I mean, I'm guilty of this, of just like buying books and just having them sit there. And I learned about this idea of like those types of books being like this anti-library where they kind of spark this potential, and they kind of suggest that there's still more to learn. So they kind of serve that purpose. But do you not have any of those books that are just sitting there?
It has only been like in the recent year, or recent 2 or 3 years, that more books have come into this house than I have actually read. I used to, if I bought the book, I'm reading it. If I spent $24 for this book, guess what? I'm going to read it. It's only recently that things have, because like books, so many books are released and books come out, and it's like, and I want to make sure I get the right copy, or I want to make sure, and so I have tons of books and, photography books and magazines and things like that that come into the house. That is overwhelming. And sometimes I don't get to them, but what I don't have staring me down, is a to be read pile of books. It's like, if I'm reading it, I'm going to read it. If I'm not going to read it, I'm just not going to read it, but I don't have a stack of books. It's like, I'm going to read these books someday. I don't really have that. I just have books that I've not read.
Yeah.
I don't have books that I'm like looking forward to read, because I don't know exactly what I'm going to start reading. Or when I'm going to start reading, or what my interest is going to be that week, But I have been lucky so far this year, because I haven't really bought that many books this year, new books, that I have been able to keep up with what I'm reading, and I've been able to, like this, but like I said, I have 2 books going at the same time, so it's easier that way, and it's easier if you. I know it sounds technical to say like when you read or how long you read, or because I don't really think about it, but I know that it's superstition or something for me. It's like, I have to start a book on Saturday. I cannot start a book, sometimes I do, and then I may not end up liking that book. It's like, I'll say, because I started this on Wednesday. If I had waited till Saturday, it would have been a better book.
Yeah.
But I have, I don't really have a to be read list. You
Mhm.
know, there are some books that people show me their to be read list, or I'll see like, I can't wait to. You'll see people say stuff like, I can't wait to dive into this book. Those are terms I just cannot stand. You know, it's like, you're not diving into that book, and in fact, the book is probably not even that great. But people have these lists of books that I always say to myself, like, you should have read that book by now. You
Uh-huh.
know, it's like, or you know, but then I realize that people, you know, people's lives are not conditioned to, you know, it's just like that they can read all the time. You know, it's like, but I don't read all the time. I just read. I would prefer to read than anything else.
Yeah. Someone says that your dedicated collection is so inspiring to really dig into a lot of authors' back catalogs and ephemera that inform their work. Your James Baldwin collection of photographs is awe-inspiring. And so I wanted to talk also to you about, you know, on your Instagram, you do feature many books by Black authors. And I just have found that so empowering and enlightening since the publishing world is still predominantly white. And there's a study actually that I just read that found that last year, 29% of children's books about Black folks were actually written by Black folks. So it's really these staggering numbers that isn't just about like representation, but also about self-authorship. So I was wondering if you could speak to that and some of the materials that you do have from Black publishers, and you know, anything that you would like to see or that you're looking for in those.
You know, a majority of writers that we love, you know, the important writers that we love, you know, from James Baldwin to like say Nikki Giovanni or Toni Morrison, they've written children's books. A lot of people have written children's books, but in terms of like Black publishing, there are a lot, you know, I don't really know now. There are a lot of independent Black publishers. There's one called Black Mass. I believe and I believe they're based out of New York,
Mhm.
and they do these wonderful, cute little editions of books. And a lot of the people I'll see a lot of independent Black publishers when I'm at like the New York Art Book Fair, which unfortunately, um, and that's where I discover a lot of people. But just as far as like the ones that I'm familiar with, or the ones that I actually collect or have, because I've actually read these. Because some, you know, there are some books when I was talking about like actually not reading it, there are some books that was like the only way it's available, and so it's like I had to read it. But you know, just be very careful with it. But like, I collect Broadside Press books that were it was from 1965 probably to like 1970 something. Um, Broadside Press, Dudley Brando out of Detroit. And he did like a series of like these little, which in most cases people call chat books, but he published some of the best, some of, you know, our, you know, most famous writers. Nikki Giovanni's first book, um, another Nikki Giovanni title. This is a title, George Barlow's Gabriel, that I love this book. You know, and this was from Detroit 60s during the Black Arts movement. And a lot of the books, they're hard to find. Some of them are available if you look around for them, you know. But he published some of our very, you know, first writers. You know, Gwendolyn Brooks went from Harper and Row to Broadside Press. You know, he published Sonia Sanchez's first books. Don Lee, who transitioning into Don Lee, who was his publishing company out of Chicago, is called Third World Press. And I pulled the book out somewhere. Oh, and Gwendolyn Brooks went from Broadside Press to Third World Press. And this is also, we had talked about like, or maybe I should wait, but we had talked about like multiple editions and type things like that. But this is a book that was published by Third World Press based out of, and they're actually still publishing. He still publishes. So
Reginald,
they're,
can you move those? It's the center to the frame
oh,
so we can
sorry.
see those cover. Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Okay, this is the Third World Press edition of Gwendolyn Brooks. It's almost a compendium of her work. It's like her collected works. And then but when we were talking about multiple editions and having many editions of books, like this is one of those titles that I have like a multiple edition of, because the book actually was first published by Gwendolyn Brooks' her own publishing company. And this copy is signed. And you know, a lot of times people will publish their own books, and then in order to reach a wider audience, they'll give it to a publisher. And so this particular title, she handed over to Third World Press, and so they published this edition. And yeah, this is a Third World Press. Yes, this is Third World Press, The Tiger Who Wore White Gloves, which is a children's book, you know, published in 1974. So it was there, it was around. But you know, I think of the Virginia Hamilton, Walter Dean Myers, you know, all of those writers were writers that have been, they were writer. I mean, they're no longer with us, but they were, you know, Black writers writing children's books, young adult books. You know, the books were there. I don't know. We had in my school, those books were there. And then like in the library, those books were there. I don't know, you know, it's speaking for a particular area, it's hard to say what other people had in their libraries. And then so when I meet people and they say like, well, I didn't know these people existed. And I always think to myself like, that's interesting, because like I've always loved them, you know, but then I realized most people are not afforded the opportunity to or there's like a drought of the types of books that people need. And that's one of the goals, you know, which with the Instagram account of putting books and stuff on there, I want to introduce people to books that they I never heard about, books they have forgotten, books. I get messages all the time. It was like, I forgot about that book. That is one of my favorite, you know, that type of stuff. And so it's interesting to share those types of stories. You know, it's important. But there were, I'm trying to think of the couple's name. I believe their last name was McKissick. They were wonderful children's books, you know, picture books. The Pickneys, Andrea and Jerry, I think, or David, you know, they were, you know, they did wonderful books growing up, you know. So their books were always there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's just like about, yeah, what you were saying, like the access to it and looking for it, and also creating, I think, those opportunities, more of those opportunities for authors, you know, self-authorship. But you mentioned using Instagram, and you know, I was curious about what it's like being a collector in Tennessee, and you know, where you find most of your books and how you've really used the internet in that way. Where have there been connections that have been built through Instagram? Are you sharing on other platforms, or
just Instagram, because
okay.
I've recently deactivated my Facebook account, which is I recommend to everybody. No, I'm sorry. Is this on Facebook? Or this is not on Facebook?
You're
Okay.
on YouTube, yes.
Okay.
Instagram is owned by
but
Facebook, so.
but just Instagram. I did have Tumblr at one time, and it was, my handle was Sontag, Bloody Sontag, and it was just like, it just was too much. And so I thought Instagram, and I cannot do Twitter because it's so toxic. I just, you know, Instagram is really the only place I actually share books. But finding books, living in Tennessee is like, I'm surrounded by a lot of used bookstores. And when I say used bookstores, I mean used bookstores, meaning books that are like $5 and $3 and $4, because they take trade, or people, you know, sell their books. It's not like a bookseller. It's not some, you know, a rare book shops. I mean, there are 3 locations in Tennessee. Can I say their name?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's 3 locations in Tennessee. Is there places, big, gigantic places, and they're called McKay's, and they are wonderful. I mean, like but you have to know how to look for books. You know, maybe I could talk about. Let me just say something real quick. When I started getting into books and learning about books and collecting books, there used to be a used rare book shop in Chattanooga, and it was called B&L, and I believe it was for Bill and Linda books. And I met Ernest Gay James in there, and Ishmael Reed was in there one time. And of course, I was just so nervous, I didn't say anything to them. But they took to me, and they would teach me and talk to me about books, about taking care of books, cleaning books, you know, like dust jacket, archival covers, and those types of things. So that's how I learned to know if I found something that's like, oh wow, you know, this is not that I'm gonna sell it. You know, well, you know, hard times roll on, maybe I have to. But they taught me to look for books, take care of books. So I'm able to go to places like McKay's and find books that people that I look online and see where people have paid hundreds or $200. I also wonder, it's like, do people actually pay that much for the book? Because it's like for a year that book has been online for $200, and so it's like I don't think nobody's bought it. But just knowing to look for books, and so I'm able to go into like used bookstores and actually find something, because of that skill of just like being able to pick out a book and being like, this is a first edition book and it's signed, like knowing the difference between like a first edition or a book club edition, or if you're interested in like value of books, like, book club edition to a first edition to a signed edition. Does the book have a dust jacket? Those types of things, and what used to happen to me a lot is how I ended up with a lot of books that I had to, make myself get rid of, is I would find a book that was a first edition, but then I would find this book, same book, like maybe a second or third printing that was signed. So I had to be like, okay, do you want the first edition or do you want the signed edition? And so those are the problems that I run into of late. So just being able to, I'm surrounded by, we don't have that many independent bookshops. There's one in Ottawa, and it's called A Little Bookish, and she is wonderful. And I think they've been there for like a couple of years. She is so wonderful that if I call her at before 11 o'clock, just say on Monday or Tuesday, if I call her on before 11, she can order a book for me and have it the next day. Because if you're a person like me who doesn't want to wait, or who loses interest, or forgets that you ordered this book, or is impatient about getting the book, she's been solid. She's been wonderful. So there aren't that many independent bookshops here. The big chain places are still here, but those are the worst places to buy books. To me, those are the places you go if you want like jelly beans and chocolate bars and stuff like that. Is like, but none of those places are in the business, or even in the business of selling books. So I will go into those places for magazines, because we don't have a good magazine spot here where you can actually go in and buy like international magazines and stuff like that. And I don't want to give those people any plug. So, but they have been known to carry really good selections of magazines. So, I mean, that's the only time I'm ever actually in a big old chain, a chain store. But I spend majority of my time in used bookstores or online. I follow a lot of used, or I mean, not used, but rare booksellers, and then used booksellers on Instagram. And we DM and we talk about books, or we talk about certain editions of books like that. So I have connections where people will say like, I don't know if you've seen this book, or do you have this copy, those types of things. And eBay is a wonderful place to look online for books. Black Market Vintage, they are wonderful. Those two, they know what they're looking for. For Keeps in Atlanta, she's amazing. She and I have the exact same taste. So we like, I know to look for her. I can look at her Instagram and be like, okay, yeah, she's good. I order a lot of books online. Every day there's something coming into this house, or UPS or going to the post office like that. But
Yeah,
that's how it starts.
someone is asking, do you have any used books you've bought with interesting or unusual inscriptions?
That goes back to the like, I don't like books that have been written in, or so. Well, I'll take that back. One time I found a book. It was a biography of Andy Warhol, and someone had wrote the they put like a letter. It was like, an envelope, and they put it in there. It was like, do not open if you're not Andy Warhol. And of course I wanted to open it, what I'm saying? It was like, this book was published like years after he had died. So it was like, how was he going to open that? Crazy stuff like that. Or sometimes I see inscriptions where I'll say to myself, like, if someone wrote this to me, or, gifted this to me as a book, and they wrote this description, like, how do you give it away? Like, but people, I always wonder that too. Like, how do books end up in used bookstores? Like, my books will end up somewhere because I have like multiple copies of it. Or you have to say, like, do you really need 5 books about vintage gas station signs? And the answer is no. So you need to figure out which one you want to keep. I end up selling books that way, but it's very rare that someone would give me something that I would sell it. And I'm talking about new books or recent books, or maybe they read it and they just didn't like it. I don't know. I've always wondered how books end up, because it's hard for me to take books to McKay's or somewhere like that and trade, you know, or just because I usually end up doing trade because you get more in trade. But it takes me like weeks and weeks. I'll say to myself, do you really have to give this away? You know, it's like, you know, do you really? Because basically, because, you know, they're not giving you like, you know, even a decent price for these books. But if you take, you know, in quantity, you can get a good deal. Because like I took, of those young adult books that I told you about, it took me 2 days. It was like about 60 of them, 60 books that I've had like throughout my year. And they were all wide, you know, YA novels. It took me, like I said, 2 weeks to keep going through and making sure, because I don't want to wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and be like that, you know, and it's not gonna happen. Half of the books I didn't even remember I had, you know. It's like, and I've not gotten to that place. Maybe 1 or 2 times, like I've been searching for a book and I was like, I have been searching and searching for this book, and then you get it and you think like, why do I feel like I have this book? You actually have to go walk around and pick up a stack, and there the book is sitting right there. It was like, okay, you know. But I've gotten good. I've gotten to the point where I know what I have. There's a lot of things here. There's a lot of piles or a lot of bookshelves, but I know everything's in alphabetical order. If that is hard to believe, but everything is in alphabetical order. I know what I have. I know where to find it. I may have to move books for a day or so to get to it, but I know where it is.
Yeah, someone actually did ask, do you have a system of organizing or cataloging your collection?
Yeah.
So it's entirely alphabetical, or are there subject areas or fiction, nonfiction?
I have like a section of like what I do. There's a guy, Kurt Thomas. He's the private librarian. And years ago, I sent him an email and I asked him about like, if you have a lot of books, and because he does like private libraries and he helps people move their libraries and those types of things. And he told me a system that was, if you have like multiple copies of, let's say, somebody like, say James Baldwin, you'll have like, I put the books are in alphabetical order. So Baldwin's naturally going to be in the B's. I'll start with chronological order too. So Go Tell It on the Mountain, all the fiction is together, and then chronological order for nonfiction. And then you do biographies, letters, and then like you know, literary studies of that author. Or and in that, you may be like you know, essays and journals and stuff like that. So I keep biographies because I usually only prefer biographies of like writers and stuff like that. So the biography of a writer is going to be with his or her book. And yeah, but everything is in alphabetical order. I have a section of like children's book, like picture books. On this top shelf up here it's really hard to see, but on this top shelf up here is T through W. And then behind that stack of books are art books. Because I had to, the art books are so heavy. I had a shelf for like art books for a long time, and it just eventually collapsed one day. So I stacked all the art books in behind there. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's like I can find it, you know, but I have to actually get to it, move things around to get to it. Yeah, alphabetical order, so I'll know exactly where it is.
Yeah, and I know you were mentioning, I thought you can maybe share the multiple editions that you did have, since you kind of brought that up a little earlier.
I forgot.
Like all the different, yeah, while you're searching. And someone also asks, do you have a holy grail piece, something that you've been looking for a very, very long time?
Yes. Meaning like, and have found it or have not found it?
I guess either. I don't, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll get to that one. We were talking about like multiple editions, and I was telling you how this is that part that makes you admit to yourself that, you know what, you're a collector. Let's say like Toni Morrison's Jazz is this is my favorite novel by Toni Morrison, Jazz. So this is the uncorrected proof of Jazz, which, you know, uncorrected proofs come out usually 6 to 3 or 4 months before the actual publication. So this is the uncorrected proof of Jazz. Then this is the published first edition of Jazz. And then there's the Franklin Library signed limited edition of Jazz, you know, which is signed by Toni Morrison. Yeah. So those are the types of things that actually make you a collector. Like when you feel like you have to have something like that, because, you know, for years I was just satisfied with this, you know, but when you start learning about books, you think like, okay, I love that book so much. I would like to see, because a lot of times with uncorrected proofs, things got changed at the last minute, you know? So that's really never my interest in trying to find it. But, you know, it's like I know I love a book if I have that type of situation going on, from an uncorrected proof to a first edition to a signed edition. You know, that's the kind of things that make you a collector.
Yeah. So then when you're rereading these, which ones do you go?
I'm going to read this one because this one is easily available.
Gotcha.
That's another thing. Like I'll read the one that's easily available. You know, like these are going to be a difficult find. They're out there, but it's going to be a difficult find. But this one I can replace. I can replace this one if I damaged it, or, you know, I've not been known to damage books, but, you know, if it just got into in you know, such a condition that I just was not happy with it anymore, that type of thing, you know, like you can always replace the trade edition of a book. A signed book, you cannot replace it. Uncorrected proof, those are hard to find, you know.
Did you want to show us more? Did you have more, or
was yes. Oh, I was talking about another edition of.
I guess yeah, and also that Holy Grail piece. Like if you did find it, and or if you're still looking for one.
Oh wow. Well, I'll go to this one. This is a multiple edition of, like, say, James Baldwin's Just Above My Head. This is the first edition hardcover, and then there's the signed limited edition of James Baldwin, Just Above My Head. I recently found, not recently, this has been about 2 or 3 years now, the signed edition. Peter Hujar, his first book, Portraits in Life and Death, was so expensive and you could never find it anymore. And if you looked online, it was, you know, they were practically wanting, you know, first and last month's rent to own the book. And I looked up and found a dealer in, I believe it was in Rochester. And he was somebody that I talked to regularly. And he told me, you know what? He said, I have multiple copies of the books. I won't tell you how much I found it, but this was how much I got it for. But this was a piece that was like a holy grail for me for a long, long time. I could never, you know, afford it. And I always wanted it. And then to finally own it, this is something that I always wanted and was able to find and to actually own myself. It's so rare that I actually look through it, you know, because some of the photos also have been printed in other editions of books too, but it's just like, I'm just very careful of this book. I'll show you another book that's like, I'll just have to move over real quick. There's one book that is like really expensive that I found. This is a piece that I have met a lot of sellers online, or just when there used to be more, you know, rare book deal, you know, bookshops here. I found this book and for little of nothing. And it's like a first edition of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. And there was a time, the interest is probably not there anymore. At least they haven't, no one's contacting before. But there was one time where a seller, he would contact me at least once a month asking me if I was ready to sell this book yet, you know. And it's just one of those things where it's like I told you, I was like, you look online and you notice where a book sells for $2,000 and it's been online for years for $2,000, you know. But it's also one of those books, you know, that if you could easily get $500 from this book, you know, it's in perfect condition, you know, taking care of books like that. You know, I don't know how much books go for now because I don't really keep up with price wise. I'm not really interested in that type of thing about books, but there's something about being in bookshops where it's just like book lovers, we know it. It's just like your heart starts racing. It's like your hand goes to this book and you're like, okay, you know, but then I'm not going to sell it, but I just want to own the book, you know.
So have you had to like negotiate, like if you've seen that person, like a listing, for instance, that's been up there for like a couple of years, have you ever been in a situation where you're like contacting that person, you're like, hey, you know what?
Yes, I've
That's
told
me.
story. I like there was one line that I used to use about like, I'm a poor college student. I'm needing this book for a, one of those types of things. Or sometimes if you're just like, if you notice they have like a book just this crazy price, you'll say something, you can be on them like, I have been searching for this book forever. And, $400 or how much ever is too much for a book is just out of my price range. If you ever have a sale, please let me know. And I've had people, gotten, instant, messages back and they say like, well, how much are you willing to pay? That type of thing. So it's just, yeah, it's looking online, finding books. I haven't really, there aren't that many places now where I trust enough. Like I usually trust booksellers online because when for me, the condition of the book is very important. So I am interested in booksellers who actually know that if this dust jacket is in very good condition as opposed to poor condition. Because you order something online or from thrift.com or one of those places and they'll say like very condition, like new. Or if I would normally sell this book for, and then you get it and it looks like it's been run through the washing machine. So it's like, I'm very particular about ordering things that I have always wanted online from like eBay and places like that. I usually only deal with people who are like booksellers, because I trust their opinion.
There's another question here about if you ever give tours of your collection, and I hope that this would be a great time to give a tour of your collection.
It looks, I'm
Oh,
telling you, it's like the setup for this is like I'm the only person in here. I'm not, and I'm the only person, you could say only a person allowed in here. So it's all set up to accommodate me, so I'll try and I'll talk about it.
yeah. I personally also asked like if people ever want to come over and see the collection with you, but it sounds like
I get emails all the time from people saying like, would it be okay? Do you loan out books for light borrowing? And I'm like, first of all, I don't even know what that means, but no. I don't say no, but I was like, I'm sorry, but I always tell people like, if I find a copy of it, I'll let you know. And I do that. Like that is something also that I do is like people, with having the type of Instagram account that I have, people constantly ask me to, do you have an extra copy of this book or do you, is this, have you seen this book like that? And I can keep those types of things in mind. And so if I'm out somewhere and I find a book, I'll send books to people all the time. And that is one thing I do love to do is just, I give away books, and I give away books to, I have book friends, not book Instagram, not the people who take the pictures of the books with the coffee cups and stuff like that, like book friends, people who I've been friends with forever. And we love books. And what we do is like, we'll pick one book that is like for a gift. And then like that book is the book that we give. It's like it's three of us. And sometimes it's three or four. And that is the book, like you pick a book that you love and you give it to those three people, and then vice versa. I usually don't like for them to give me the book because I don't, it's like, but they're such good people and they have such good taste. Also, it's like I'm very rarely disappointed in something. What may end up happening is like they love something because you can't say what the book is you like. I may already have the book, so it's like, so there, once again, the collector problem, you end up with multiple copies of a book, but yeah, let me give you just like, I'll try to do something. Let me see. It's going to look crowded. I will tell you that much. And it fits just me.
wow.
But here's like a selection of, I collect Andy Warhol interviews because anybody who follows me on Instagram knows that I am the world's biggest Fran Lebowitz fan. So this is a selection of, I have always collected interview magazines. So this is from like years and years of magazine. That was the what was this? The first decade of interview, there was like a limited edition set of like 7 books. And here's another collector problem. I got this original copy right here from Soup Books. And are they still open? Are they still a bookstore in LA?
Oh,
Book Soup?
Yeah.
Book Soup, yes. Yeah. And so got that original set from them. And then eBay. You know, you see things on eBay like 4 o'clock in the morning, you're searching on eBay and somebody has this same set of books for, you know, starting bid at $29.99. And then you look and, you know, it's like 10 minutes and nobody's bid on it. And I will tell you this, that I am a last minute bidder because if I see something I want, I have to have it. I'm very upset if I don't get it, you know, so it's like, and I have learned to pay, you know, to offer the amount that you know that you don't want to have to pay, but you will pay for it. And usually always come through. But like this is a set of interview magazines that was in a limited edition collection at from Steidel, I believe. Yes. So here I have 2 sets of these. The only one set with the actual crate, but then I have another set of the actual books that are inside the crate, you know, but just like a collection of interview magazines. Oscar Wilde. Let me see. It's really difficult. Like I said, this room is one of those rooms that fits only me.
It's beautiful though. Right?
And it's like I can get like you can't imagine, but there's like paths that I can walk through. Like I can go in behind that table right there. So that type of thing. Yeah. Let's see.
So this is the only room though? Like, do you let your...
No, the book, this is like the main hub. This is the book. This is the room where the books come into. It's like where they're brand new and you just got it, or you're having to decide if you know, if I'm going to keep this book or that type of thing, or this is the book where, and this is the actual room I actually read in because I'm not one of those people who can read anywhere except in here. Like I cannot read anywhere except in here. And people, you know, you'll go somewhere, it's like people say stuff like, do you, when you're flying, do you take books on? I have never in my life been able to go to a coffee shop, be on an airplane, and actually read a book. I've never been able to do it. I can't concentrate because when you're reading, it's like to me, I'm like really engaged in the book and I'm thinking about what's going on. And I'm like, this, you know, it's hard to do that. And, you know, or I don't want to be the type of person that has to reread something over and over, unless it's a difficult writer. You don't want to have to just keep reading. When I'm reading, I want to be in that book, centered somewhere in that book. And you can't do that in public. I've never been able to do it. Mm-hmm. I can't even listen to music and read at the same time.
Yeah, that's a hard one for me as well.
My attention span is like, oh wait, you know, I'm here, you know, it's like, so it's like if I focused, that is also a way to know if the book is good, if it has my attention. Meaning like I'm not thinking about Instagram post or that type of thing. It's like, because what I had to learn to do is like to just post something on Instagram and go, you know, and then go back later on and maybe check something or talk, you know, DM, like that type of things. Like, but to just constantly be somewhere on Instagram, it, you know, it just pulls you in and it's a distraction. And so it just gets in the way of actually enjoying a book. So it's like to post it, start reading or whatever I'm doing, and then just do that for a while.
Well, we are almost out of time, which is so unfortunate because I feel like we could just spend the whole day with you. But someone did ask what your favorite...
I'm rambling.
But no, this is great. I mean, really, your love for books really just comes through. Someone did ask what your favorite Fran Lebowitz item in your collection is. So,
oh, you know, every time I have went to New York to hear her speak, or actually the first time I ever saw her speak was in Seattle. And I took her some books when I saw her speaking in Seattle. I took her book because she, you know, she's a reader too. And so I took her book and she gave her a book. Then, and this was like that was in 2012. Yeah, it had to be like 2012. Then it was like 2014. No, yeah, about 2014. I went to see her speak again, and I had another book that I was going to give her. And a friend of mine that went with me, he said, "Do you think she'll remember you?" And I was like, "Why would she?" You know. And sure enough, she like remember. And the funny part of it is, he took pictures of her remembering her reaction of when I gave her that book, because she asked me some questions when I was the first time I'd ever met her was in Seattle, and she asked me questions like, she said, are you a professor, or are you or are you just a bookworm like me? I was like, I'm just a bookworm, because I gave her like a signed, there's a writer from Knoxville, what's from Knoxville, James Adgie. They reconstructed his novel, A Death in the Family, at the UTK Press. And I had given her a copy of that because I said, have you read this one? She's like, yeah. I was like, well, this is a reconstructed, so that naturally sparked a conversation that I would be there talking, and she remembered that she said, you gave me those books. And so she signed my book to Reginald, We Will Always Have Seattle. I just, there's so much Fran Lebowitz stuff that has come into this house. That is a lot of how things have come into the house too, or how books are like, reading interviews with Fran Lebowitz, and she'll say like, so-and-so is my favorite writer, or not favorite writer, but she'll recommend a book, like I found James Purdy through Fran Lebowitz. I love James Purdy's books, and this is so long ago. This is when the public library used to have to go in. And before everything was like online, or everything was online, but they hadn't transferred all of their old magazines over to actual online. So you had to use that, what was that thing called, where you put that little film in and like move it around in this machine. And it's like this, they didn't even use it anymore. It was like in the basement downstairs, but I would go down there and start looking, and I would find, because they had used to be this book, it was index books, and it would tell you that like all of the interviews that Fran Lebowitz did this year in magazines. And so I would find that magazine and just go through and just scroll and look, and she would recommend different writers, But I don't know, there's so much Fran Lebowitz stuff that comes into this house that I don't really have a favorite one anymore. All of the books are signed, and I also have multiple editions of hers. I have the uncorrected proof of Metropolitan Life and Social Studies, then signed editions and those types of things. Yeah, I can't think of anything Fran Lebowitz wise that is, I can't really think of anything. People would say like, what would you grab if your house was on fire? And first of all, I'm going to try my hardest to get a bunch of things out, but if I can, I don't have those kinds of ideals about books. It's just like, because it's nothing lasts. I don't know how long I'm going to have this collection. That type of, I'm thinking in terms, I want to enjoy it while I have it, but I also want to share it with people, and sharing it on Instagram. People DM me all the time, do you have this book, or like I said, I send books to people all the time. People send me books. That's the wonderful thing. It's like I've met so many people who love books and who love to read, and they'll say like, well, if you've read this one, you probably haven't, so I've been able to make connections with people who love to read, not people who love to take pictures of their books, or with the coffee cup and, and the pumpkin spice latte and all that type of, because it's just like, but people who will say, and then you can get in this argument, you can just get into this argument with them about the book. It's just like, and I've met so many people like that on Instagram. I've had wonderful, social media has been a really good experience for me.
Well, with that said, we do have to let the other presenters in next. So thank you so much, Reginald. If you aren't following Reginald already, go to Instagram. We'll pop the handle and the link. It's at xʷməthkwəy. And thank you so much for being here and just sharing your love and joy for books. It's really addictive, and
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah.
Because when you asked me, I was like, well, it was like, oh, just the conversations I have with people all the time can do that. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.